After Satan's sales pitch for Eve to eat from the fruit of the tree, we have, and Eve does not automatically eat the fruit. She has this kind of intellectual pause, this intellectual response where she reflects on the forbidden tree and the story that Satan disguised as the snake has told her. She admires the fruit. She doesn't know what to do. She's been told by God that the consequence of eating this tree is death, and she is confused by the snake's contradictory statements. She is also confused because the snake seems to positively be affected by eating the fruit. He went from being a snake with no language to being able to speak the same language as man. And it has been established in other books that death is a negative consequence. And although Eve is still unaware of what death is, however, she seems to think perhaps it is not as bad as it was made out to be. While she's still slightly cautious, she wonders if the fruit will affect her in the same way that it did the snake, because they are two very different things. And this idea is where she considers the option of death is something purely intended for human. And part of Eve's confusion about eating the fruit comes from where the snake praises God after having eaten the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And the snake's praising God and acquired language skills do not make it appear as if anything bad could possibly come from eating the tree's fruits. Eve, she thinks, I mean, it's some of the look in lines 758 through 762, where Eve is thinking over what death could possibly be, and it is has never really been explained other than as a negative consequence, and while still being a very important aspect of the poem. At the end of the passage, Eve decides to eat the tree, reaches up to pick the fruit, and she did this because from what she can tell and what is presented in the by the snake is that good things will come, and that death clearly cannot be the option if the snake is alive, or at least death cannot be as bad as she once thought. So Eve is saying that the unknown of the tree is what is known, and the unknown is still what is unknown. So it's kind of confusing and kind of complicated, and I don't know what to make of these lines. But essentially, the point is that she kind of thinks, she goes back and forth in her mind about whether or not to eat the fruit, and this kind of back and forth between whether or not she should do it. This intellectual response is almost the same as the actual commission of the sin, because she may as well have committed it because she is thinking of doing it. So Eve eats the fruit, and she has she eats the fruit, and while eating the fruit, she fails to notice that the serpent has retreated back into the thicket of the earth, and she is, because she is a completely absorbed with this fruit. To her, it is absolutely delicious and unique in taste, and while Eve greedily devours the fruit, she fails to realize that she is eating death, and after finishing, she feels lifted with joy as if she had been drinking wine. And it's astonishing that Eve falls for temptation despite being warned by a powerful angel and the man she loves above all else. And in this passage where she's greedily eating this fruit, reveals kind of a lack of integrity within her, and this emphasis on greed in which she devours the fruit portrays her as quite an unsympathetic character. She talks about how wonderful the tree of knowledge has been, and that she has grown mature in terms of her knowledge. She thanks Satan for his encouragement to eat from the tree, and if it weren't for him, she would still be ignorant. And she thinks about how much better it is to have knowledge rather than ignorance, and she calls God our great forbidder, protected by all his angels, where she is obviously wondering why he would deprive people of knowledge. But then she starts to kind of think, she starts to think about the repercussions or the consequences of her actions, and wonders if she will tell Adam about the tree. And on the one hand, If she doesn't, then for once the two of them will be of equal intelligence. For So she thinks. But then she wonders if she will die from having eaten the fruit, and dreads the thought of Adam finding another wife to replace her. So, in some ways, like, she doesn't want to tell Adam about the fruit because she will be the more powerful one. She will overthrow this kind of balance of power, overthrow the hierarchy, and she will be the kind of she'll one up him, so to speak. But she second guesses it, and she thinks of Adam and another wife, and she gets jealous. She says it's jealousy and not any other emotion that makes her reverse her decision to share it. And she realizes that her love for him is mixed with fear, jealousy, and possessiveness, not actual true care for his welfare. Um, so she turns away from the tree of knowledge, and before departing, first low reverence is done, and Eve bows low to the tree as to the power that dwelt within. The nectar is defined as the drink of the gods, and the tree appears to be godly in the sense that Eve treats it like a superior. This seems to exemplify Eve's disloyalty to and betrayal of God, and Adam, on the other hand, is waiting, desirous for her return. And Adam is still innocent. We get to this kind of reunification of the two of them, and Adam is still this innocent here, unlike Eve. And while she has been gone, he has woven a garland for her. And as Eve approaches, Adam feels as though something is wrong. He goes out to meet her. And we see that Adam clearly adores her, and this adoration will later be made clear in the fact that he has this kind of dual sin. He eats from the tree of knowledge out of love and devotion to her, and then he notices that Eve holds a bough of fairest fruit. And in the next couple of lines, Eve makes a confession. She says that she ate from the tree, but, hey babe, wait, I haven't suffered any of the consequences. And he's been weaving this garland of flowers for her hair, but he drops them and explains, astonished, stood blank, while horror chill ran through his veins, and all his joints relaxed from his slack hand. The garland wreathed for Eve dropped down. He is unable to speak due to shock and horror, and focusing on the garland he was making for her in her absence, he seems to have only been thinking of her while she was gone. She doesn't give a rat's tooey about him while they've been separated, and all he can do while they are separated is think of Eve. So, true, she has been thinking of him after she ate the fruit, but more in a jealous way than he has. I also want to draw attention to the fact that he drops a garland made of flowers, and his blood runs cold. And we typically associate flowers with spring and their carefree lives, and that is what Adam and Eve were before she eats the fruit. And when the chill runs through him, it's almost signaling the cold turn both of them are making. He remained in the spring while he was oblivious to what she had done, but as soon as she finds out, there is this striking change. And Adam has this very angry reaction to finding out about the fact that Eve has eaten the forbidden fruit. He speaks as if it was Eve's virginity in some weird way that has been taken, and he says, "How art thou lost, how on a sudden lost, deflowered." Adam then acts very distraught and questions how all this happened to Eve, and Adam goes on to explain how he can't live without her, and even if God made another woman, he would still never get over Eve. And in my opinion, for someone who is to have a lot of wisdom, as Adam is supposed to, Adam has none. Instead of thinking logically about what it would mean for him to defy God, he is blinded by his love, and he is only considering the consequences of not being with Eve anymore. So in some ways, he rationalizes this decision to follow Eve into sin, like the angels do when they follow Satan or when they follow Lucifer into hell. So, anyways, Adam has this kind of back and forth inner monologue where he starts to think if he's going to follow Eve, and he thinks about God. He says, "Nor can I think that God, creator wise, though threatening will in earnest so destroy us, his prime creatures dignified, so high set over all his works." Adam makes some assumptions as to how God rules the world, and he is correct in some way, that because they are not killed, and this would seem to prove that God makes empty threats to keep people in line, but there seems to be a desire not to let Satan win over all, despite his individual victories over the will of God. Adam concludes that he will stay with Eve no matter the punishment, and he says to Eve, "Our state cannot be severed. We are one flesh. To lose thee would be to lose myself." And Adam's fate is sealed when he chooses Eve over his kind of devotion to God. And then we get Adam's temptation at the words of Eve, and Eve speaks to Adam, trying to tempt him into taking a bite from the forbidden fruit. And she begins by flattering Adam. She says that, "Oh, I love you, and she also praises his perfection and invites Adam to eat from the fruit and join her as one heart and one soul. And she indicates that death shall separate them, and if he does not eat from the truth, she says, "You don't love me. You don't love me if you don't damn yourself to hell and eat the fruit." And given that kind of argument, given that Adam's virtue still remains, Eve takes on a role similar to that of Satan. She is tempting Adam in the same way the wily serpent tempted her. She starts with flattery. Then she talks about his perfection. And then she makes this illogical argument about, he says, were it I thought death meant would ensue this my attempt, I would sustain alone the worst, and not persuade thee, rather die deserted than oblige thee with the fact pernicious to thy peace. So Eve is saying to Adam that she would never do anything to gravely harm him or his peaceful state, which is false. It's lies. She lies. False, given that she is already aware of what the fruit will do to him should he bite it. Even then, Eve then says to Adam that the fruit has opened his eyes to new hopes and joys, which is also a lie. And she concludes her speech by imploring Adam to deliver his fear of death to the winds and to eat the fruit despite its risks. Eve's deceitfulness here bears a grave similarity to that of Satan, and further faults her for the fall of Eden. So Adam decides to eat, and Eve is overjoyed. She embraces Adam because of his choice to incur divine displeasure for her sake. It is important to note the use of the word choice, as it both reasserts the presence of free will and places some measure of blame on Adam. The reader is then told that Eve gives Adam the fruit with liberal hand, showing that she is not reluctant to condemn her lover to an unknown fate. Another crucial passage here is when Adam was not deceived, but fondly overcome with female charm. So unlike Eve, Adam has not been tempted by Satan. Eve in this moment plays the same role to Adam as Satan did to her. So she takes on this role of evil temptress. He is overcome by Eve's feminine wiles, and he abandons all thought and reason with the comparison made to drunkenness. And Eve is really kind of taken in by the devil or Satan and his manipulation, but manipulation of her reason. But Adam is manipulated in a different way than Eve is. So I think it's interesting. And just as what happened when Eve ate the fruit, Adam's transgression leads to this kind of physical reaction by the earth. Nature gives a second groan, sky lowered in muttered thunder, and some sad drops wept at contemplating the mortal sin. So nature is personified in the final lines of like 1013, where um, and the presence of rain and thunder is explained as the earth groaning and crying. And this section kind of ends with Adam and Eve staring lustfully at one another with their carnal desire inflaming. So the aftermath of this forbidden fruit, the fruit is like an aphrodisiac essentially. They become extremely amorous towards each other, hint hint, nudge nudge, wink wink, and they both have this kind of knowledge of shame, and they essentially I mean, they fall asleep, they they wake up, and they have this sense of shame. There is this new kind of knowledge of good and evil, and this basically, this section kind of, the fall starts with Adam's decision of picking Eve over reason, which gives women a bad rap during this time. So we get this kind of new institution of views of men and women and their roles and their place. It's like, don't let women control you and your decisions because it'll be the end of you, that kind of thing. So after they feel the shame of their nakedness, there's the loss. This loss of innocence is compared to the biblical Samson's loss of his power to Delilah when she cut his hair. And it's interesting to note the contrast between the sinful and guilty intercourse in this kind of last section. This kind of perspective changes of morality. And then finally, we get, after they look for some clothes, we get this kind of blame game that's being played, where Adam really blames. He essentially, he's now aware that they're naked, they're unhappy, they're miserable, they're no longer good, and he says, "Let anybody in the future require proof like we did, as it was when people need this proof, they begin to fall." And an issue I have with this kind of final passage and Adam's anger for Eve is that he ate the fruit as well. He was tempted. He was tempted only by his wife, of whom he was supposed to be the master. Eve, at least, was tempted by Satan, who is far more powerful, either than either Adam or Eve. And Adam was tempted merely by a woman, his inferior. If Eve is at fault, Adam is equally at fault. And it goes back to that idea of tempting, or Adam's fall would be a greater dishonor. And in some ways, Adam's fall is this kind of dishonorable moment, because it didn't take much for it, just as it was easy to get Eve to fall, it was just as easy to get Adam to fall, because Eve is his weakness. So they blame each other, and then Eve says, I mean, when Adam blames Eve, Eve then goes back and replies that her it's all based on, if you had just listened to me, none of this would have happened. That's what Adam says. And then Eve says that, well, the serpent, he was so cunning and deceptive, and that it, even had it been Adam that he had targeted, he would have been successful in his temptation. She didn't expect for an animal to harbor any ill will towards her, and therefore was not suspicious of its motive. And it's interesting to note that the word enmity is used to describe the relationship between Adam and Eve after their fall. But in the poem, Eve uses it while talking about Satan and herself. Eve asks Adam, "Was I to have never parted from that side?" She seems to think that if she had stayed permanently under Adam's wing, she may as well have just remained as one of his ribs and not been given life. Eve then turns to blame back into Adam, asking why, as the head, he did not put his foot down and forbid her from leaving. And she goes on once again to answer her own question by arguing that they would not have fallen if not for his willingness to submit to Eve's will. So it goes. The book ends by revealing the truth that Adam has now sees what the world is about around him, and he starts by setting Eve straight, saying that she is ungrateful to Adam for eating the fruit. And he says that if he did not eat from the tree of knowledge, he might have lived in joy, immortal bliss. And Adam gives up the possibility of eternity and life itself to be with Eve. He tells her that she was warned, told of the dangers that were lurking and waiting, and she didn't listen. And Adam tries to switch the blame from him to Eve, saying that if Eve had only listened, she might not have eaten from the tree. And then Adam says he has no control over what she chooses. And he says that forcing someone who has free will is impossible. And this is a curious thought, considering both Adam and Eve are to have free will. God would have no control over their decisions of eating the tree of knowledge. So why would God create a rule that they could not eat from the specific tree when he had no control over no control all along? So in the end of this book, Adam and Eve are continuing to argue over whose fault it is. And this is kind of abnormal because they are typically happy with each other in their lives. So the question I have is, how is this any different from the relationship from the beginning? And that's the question that I want to ask for our discussion for this week. So there is that I've gone on for too long, but there is this kind of concept of free will, and in some ways Adam and Eve, Adam very much is a representation of John Milton and is falling for not falling for, but being guided by his devotion and love for someone like Oliver Cromwell into a decision that may or may not have been good. But anyways, I'm interested to see what you guys think about book 9, and I'm sorry that I talked so long, but I hope you enjoy Paradise Lost, and I'm interested to see what you guys say.